Global Markets. Welcome to the show, Amit.
Thanks for having me on, Kshitij.
Thank you so much for taking the time out, Amit. And well, you're uniquely positioned with exposure to both India and the US. What are the most prominent conversations you're currently having with family offices and investors across these markets?
So there is absolutely no doubt about it, Kshitij. What you just said is absolutely correct. That lot of family offices who have been investing primarily in India,
Mhm,
they are now more and more enthused and more fascinated with the whole AI story, which has been unfolding now for the last 3 years.
uh-huh,
And particularly, I think in the last 2 years, we've seen that while the Indian market has been rather lackluster
mhm,
and obviously does not have too many plays where you could actually bet on the AI story. So while the investors in some of the other markets like US and even like, for example, South Korea
mhm,
and Taiwan and many others, they are literally spoiled for choice when it comes to AI plays. So this is a conversation that we are probably having with each and every family office that is connected with us as to how they can
uh-huh,
leverage this AI story which is unfolding, how they can invest at least a part of their corpus
sure.
into stories which are still very fresh and yet have a long way to go.
Mm.
And AI probably fits the bill for many of them at this point of time.
Absolutely. Well, in fact, the AI boom in the US is clearly a dominant theme. So, how can sort of Indian investors meaningfully participate in this opportunity across both public and private markets?
So, fortunately for most of the ultra HNIs who either have some of their money lying overseas, or
Mm.
who are in a good position to take their money out through LRS, or if
Okay.
they are big enough, there are certain options which are permitted by RBI, where you could take out more
Mm.
money than what the limitations of the LRS are.
Mm.
So, so many of them are wanting to invest overseas. And
Okay.
yes, you could invest both in private and public markets. So
Mm.
in public markets, of course, there are the usual suspects like Nvidia, for example. Like many of these hyperscalers, they are truly an AI story.
Mm.
You could, of course, argue for one in favor of one against the other.
Mm.
But of
Mm.
course, whether it is Nvidia or it is Alphabet, in some ways even Microsoft, Meta, Oracle,
Yes.
and many others like CoreWeave. So there are many options in the US markets as far as the public markets are concerned. And then even in the private market space, there is, for example, OpenAI, there is an Anthropic, and there are
Mm.
so many others where you could bet on.
Mm.
And there are ways to invest in the public markets, which is, of course, very simple. Most of us understand that. And as far as the private markets are concerned, if your corpus is big enough, you could play on individual stocks. But if that is not the case, there are some funds in US
Mm.
which actually piggyback on some of these very large unlisted companies in the AI space or related space, and you could participate in those funds,
Mm.
which could be a mutual fund, it could even be an ETF, which
Yeah.
eventually invests in many of these unlisted stocks. So I think there are many options for
Sure.
investors to choose from,
Mm.
and which is what many of the family offices are doing.
Absolutely. In fact, AI has been the buzzword across markets, and not just in India, but across the globe for the past good, 12 to 18 months time. But I'm sure, a lot of investors who sort of hear the story would want to understand how real that is. So, on the ground, how real is this AI-driven transformation, and sort of which sectors are seeing the most disruptions or capital inflows?
So Kshitij, that's a great question. I think the situation is changing very, very fast at the ground level. So
Uh-huh.
AI is for real, and it is affecting almost every industry, sector, theme,
Mm.
and companies on the ground. It is affecting their market,
Okay.
their how their customers want to buy their products or not buy their products. It is affecting their operational efficiencies. It is
Mhm.
affecting the manpower which is involved in many of these operating companies. And this is much talked about, of course, whether AI would eventually take away a lot of these jobs in the middle management,
Mm.
not
Mm.
necessarily at the topmost level or in the bottommost level, but in the middle management. How many jobs in which sectors will AI eventually sort of take out? And
Mm.
in lieu of them, how many jobs would AI actually create? So there is no doubt in our minds that this is for real.
Okay.
This is going to go a long way.
Mm.
And 10 years back or 15 years back, when we look at it, then 2022 to 2023
Mm.
would appear like pivots where, suddenly, while AI has been there for a long time, but it would
Yeah.
appear like a pivotal moment in global economic history where they gathered mass and they started changing the world and the life around us.
Mm.
But of course, one could argue that while there is no doubt in my mind that this is going to go a long way, Kshitij.
Mm.
But there is also a school of thought in fact, towards which we are gravitating,
Mm.
that in between, while this 15, 10, 15, 20 year change is for real, it is going to happen right in front of our eyes. But
Yeah.
there is a case that many of the companies are over investing in this theme, and
True.
in case the theme is even slightly slower, it is slightly slow to affect the lives the way it is eventually going to.
Mm.
What that what that period of inertia, or that period of reduced acceleration or reduced speed, what that could do to the fortunes of many of these companies who are over investing at this point of time. So
Mm.
there are a lot of questions which are very, very relevant to this theme and to the subject.
Mm.
And I guess what we are trying to do is that within the available knowledge, within the available, let's say, wisdom which already exists, we are trying to interpret it on the basis of macro top-down theme,
Mm.
and then trying to place our bets on various companies and various sectors.
Absolutely, rightly said there, Amit. And in fact, before geopolitical concerns or the trade wars, one thing which predominantly affected markets was the AI theme, and the sector which was most impacted was the IT. Now, we've seen disruptions in IT before as well, but do you think 2026 structurally is different from previous tech cycles? So there will be, a rebirth of IT would take place.
I think, Kshitij, you're absolutely right. That rebirth, in a way, is already happening.
Mm.
And this is not just happening in India, it's happening pretty much in every part of the world,
Mm.
where markets are trying to assess which companies' models are probably more at risk or more under threat.
Mm.
So, for example, the software companies which are most reliant on programming, on writing the code,
Sure.
and which are not very product oriented, but which are service oriented, which means that they are actually helping their customers to
mm,
sort of become more aligned with the new reality, and they are helping them to sort of move from their current system and their current model of business and operations
right.
into a model which is more aligned with the
Mm,
reality, more aligned with the developments that are taking place in AI and related fields.
mm,
I think many of those companies are actually under threat because a lot of this stuff could actually be done over a period of time using much less manpower
mm.
and basically using the tools which are now already developing and are in a very advanced stage.
Okay.
So, in that sense, AI is truly disruptive, and many of the existing software players in the world are probably the most threatened
Mm,
because their revenue model is really, really under threat.
okay.
So of course, it's an ongoing debate.
Mm,
None of this is settled, Kshitij. Even as
yes.
far as the Indian IT is concerned, you
Mm,
know that there are many different views. There are some people, and these are all experts. I'm not talking about a
right.
layperson.
Mm,
Many of the experts argue that many of these companies are going to lose a lot of their revenue base over the next 5 years.
okay.
On the other hand, there are many others who feel that their productivity is going to go up
Mm,
and they would be able to pretty much do the same stuff and maybe a lot more stuff with relatively fewer number of people. But their relevance is going to remain for a very long time. So there
mm,
are many different views on this. But I think what an or you know what somebody can what can really help one to understand which way things are going is to
mm,
also see what the market is doing, because you know that market is the collective wisdom of
mm,
pretty much all the experts all over the world.
mm,
And clearly, the software stocks, many of them are taking it on their chin. Many of them have gone down by anything from 20-30% to
mm,
as much as 50-60-70% in India and overseas. So clearly, one can infer from that that the school of thought which says that their revenue models are going to be under threat over the next 5 to 7 years, that
mm,
particular school of thought is probably right now getting more votes
mm.
and more endorsement from the market forces than
Right.
the other point of view.
Absolutely rightly said there, Amit. And let's go beyond borders. And we are seeing more Indian ultra HNIs explore global investing. So, how are routes like LRS and Gift City are changing access to US market?
So LRS is of course, Kshitij, very simple to understand, and because it's been there for now almost
Mm,
17, 18 years. So most of the Indian wealthy families, they understand what LRS is,
yes.
and it's very easy. You could just open an account with any of the international brokers, transfer some money which is lying in your rupee denominated accounts into the
Mm,
accounts that you open with these entities, and you
right.
can start investing
Mm,
pretty much all the stocks all over the world, whether it is US or it is Korean, Taiwanese, Chinese, or any place where you think there is most action on AI front. You
mm,
could start buying those stocks. You could buy the relevant ETFs. So this is LRS. But apart from LRS, Gift City has now opened up some other options whereby Indian operating companies and Indian family offices can open up their family offices in Gift City, and
okay.
they can take out a lot more than $250,000 per family member.
Oh,
And they could set up a family office, they could take out more money in the Gift City, and from the
mm,
Gift City, they can then invest pretty much again anywhere in the world. So there are routes and paths available for large family offices in particular to take out money which is beyond the LRS limits, though the permissions are slow to come by and it's not as easy as it sounds. There are relevant RBI permissions and various measures and various regulations which are involved. But yes, the parts are available to all rich Indian families.
Absolutely. In fact, the process has started, and I'm sure as the time progresses, it will be more streamlined, and it'll be easy for Indian family offices to start, investing across borders in a more efficient way. I'm sure in a very short term. That's what we foresee. But let's talk about something on investors who are in the US and probably looking at India as an attractive investment destination. So the NRI and the diaspora of capital story seems to be gaining momentum. So how significant is this pool of capital and how is it sort of influencing flows between India and the US?
Absolutely, Kshitij. This is now increasingly becoming bigger and bigger.
Mhm,
And one of the factors, of course, has been that since August, September of 2024, Indian markets have underperformed significantly all major markets of the world in the
mhm.
developed space and also in the emerging market space.
Yeah.
So many of the investors who were very happy with the Indian market performance till then,
Mm,
and they were making such great returns here that there was no particular motivation for them to think in terms of taking bigger chunks of their money overseas to invest in other markets. They have increasingly been they are increasingly becoming more and more receptive to the idea that at least some part of their wealth
mm,
should work for them overseas, which not only helps them to protect their portfolios from the INR depreciation,
mm.
but also affords them more opportunities, which are probably not well represented in India.
Okay.
Lately, of course, we know that in the last 2 3 years, a lot of action has happened on the AI and the automation and machine learning part, and we do not have that many players in the listed and even the unlisted space where you could leverage
Mm,
on
mm,
that knowledge.
mm,
So this is happening, and it is affecting the flows to a good extent. I would not say that right now it is so big that it is moving the needle in terms of India's foreign exchange reserves,
okay.
because in the bigger scheme of things, it is still not such it is not yet happening in such force that
Mm,
it would affect India's reserves.
okay.
But yes, I can safely say that billions of dollars
Mm,
are moving in that aligned with that thought.
okay.
And a lot of NRIs who were sending most of their money overseas to be invested in the Indian markets,
Mm,
they are now keeping a chunk of that into and putting it into the overseas markets. It is happening across investors and family offices in the Middle East, Singapore, UK, Europe, and of course even US.
mm,
And apart from that, there is money from the Indian residents and Indian families here in India who
mm,
are now also increasingly trying to participate through LRS and through various other measures which the RBI affords us.
okay.
So I would say it's very difficult to quantify it precisely,
Mm,
but my sense is that a goodish 8 to 10 billion dollars of flows are being affected either by money not coming to India and being invested outside,
mm,
or by money going out of India to be invested outside. Putting
mm,
both of them together, my best sense is that it could be in the vicinity of $8 to $10, give or take.
okay.
So these are meaningful flows, but of course not large enough to really affect the India macro picture or the India FX reserve position.
Absolutely. And lastly, Amit, how do you currently read the US and the global macro environment from an Indian investor's lens? And where do you see the biggest risk and opportunities over the next, let's say 12 to 24 months?
Thanks, Kshitij, for asking that. So, I think as a macro top-down investor and a fund manager, this is what totally consumes our attention day in, day out.
Mhm.
And of course, it's a very volatile macro environment, and it has been one now for quite a long time, particularly ever since Donald Trump became US president.
Yeah.
It's a very, very volatile environment, and things are changing practically on a daily basis. So it becomes sometimes difficult to navigate them on a short-term basis, but I think the longer-term trends would hold irrespective of the short-term volatility. So my sense is that the current correction, which
Mm.
started because of the Middle East tensions and the Iran war,
Right.
uh, my sense is that they do present an opportunity for
Mm.
investors to invest because they are finding some of their good stories and good stocks at relatively better valuations.
Yeah.
And eventually, the war is going to be sorted out one way or the other.
Mm.
And one can hope for normalcy to return at some point over the next few weeks or a couple of months. And anybody who has invested their money into stocks
Mm.
over the last few weeks would probably gain at that point.
Okay.
So, which is where we are as well. We are gradually increasing our exposure to stocks. We
Mm.
were sitting at very, very low participation rates. We were sitting at single digit exposure to equity in many of our products,
Right.
most of our products rather. And we have
Mm.
now brought it up substantially to a higher level in
Mm.
the hope that once the conflict is kind of resolved, we would be able to, we would be able to get some decent gains. So near term, we see tailwinds coming from conflict resolution. We see tailwinds coming from many of the AI stories that we've just talked about.
Mm.
Longer term, I think longer term means that over the next 2 to 3 years, of course, we have a lot of concerns.
Right.
My sense is that, like every other technology, new technology that has evolved in the last 300, 400 years of world history, we have underestimated the distance that that technology will go. But we have probably, at the height of things, we have overestimated the speed with which things
Mm.
will change.
Right.
This has held true for railroads and electricity and telegraph and automation, I mean, aviation,
Mm.
then your driver cars and your
Mm.
internet. And I think same would be true this time around as well. AI is going to change a lot of things on the ground over the next 10 to 15 years, but
Mm.
people just may be overestimating how much it's going to change over the next couple of years. So my sense is that anybody who is uh, over invested in stocks probably would get a very decent and a profitable exit at
Okay.
some point over the next few months.
Mm.
But then after that, I think the tailwinds will be overweighed, or
Mm.
let's say overshadowed by the headwinds coming from this fact that we are in
Mm.
a bubble-like phase. We are in
Yeah.
very late stages of the macroeconomic cycle.
Mm.
We are in we are vulnerable because of the debt. We are
Mm.
vulnerable because of the overinvestment happening in AI. We are vulnerable because of the debt which is being picked up by a lot of companies to invest in AI related themes. So
Right.
all these have added to the vulnerabilities of the macro system. So my
Mm.
sense is that we'll get a good exit, and we should take that exit within the next few months, or at least reduce our weightages, make our money, reduce our weightages to equities,
Mm.
and then see how things move on from there. Because over the next 2 to 3 years, chances of a US recession
Mm.
and chances of a US bear market in equities are becoming higher.
Right.
And that would obviously affect equities all over the world,
Mm.
including India.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, Amit, thank you for sharing those valuable insights on how Indian investors can navigate actually global opportunities.